Bob, we are into the next division of Isaiah, this great chunk of material in chapters 44 to 48. And pretty soon, almost immediately, we have several poems about this figure Cyrus, King Cyrus, the head of the Persian Empire, this empire that's going to come in and just reshape the whole known world. Israel has been captive in Babylonia. Babylonia is going to fall to Cyrus. And the language that God is using of Cyrus is quite striking. In chapter 44, verse 28, God calls him my shepherd. In chapter 45, verse 1, you've got this royal language of the deity taking the hand of the chosen king. Let me ask you about Cyrus. How is he one of God's agents? What's going on here with him?
He certainly is one of God's agents, and of all of the agents, we've looked at a number of different agents so far in Isaiah as the way in which the divine will gets worked in the world. This one has got to be one of the oddest ones. It's one thing to talk about the Assyrian king Sennacherib as the agent of punishment on Israel. It's quite another thing not just to talk about the Persian king Cyrus as the agent of Israel's return to the land, that is, the fulfillment of the promise to Israel, but to give Cyrus royal titles, the kinds of language that you referred to, calling Cyrus my shepherd. This is language that God is using of Cyrus. Shepherd is a traditional royal title. It's one that is given to kings, and they have the responsibility to shepherd their people, to take care of the sheep. And it is Cyrus who's going to rebuild Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It's not just capture Babylon and punish Babylon because of what they did to the Israelites, but it's going to be, Cyrus is going to be the agent of the people's return to the land, is going to enable this, and indeed historically this is exactly what happened. It is under Cyrus's rule that Israel is allowed to go back and fulfill the promises that we've already had given to Israel in chapter 40.
I would think that would be a hard pill for people to swallow. I mean, if you're going to have a new Exodus, how about a new Moses from within Israel, one that's a member of Abraham's posterity, not a foreign pagan?
You'd really like to see that as a sort of local agent. And indeed, chapter 40 envisions that. It envisions this group being summoned to lead the people back. God is personally going to lead the people back. Jerusalem is being commissioned to be an agent in the proclamation of its own salvation. These are all internal means of proclaiming and fulfilling the promise. What we have here is the idea that God has now chosen Cyrus to be the active agent here. And not only that, God is going to do a lot of other things for Cyrus. In chapter 45, he is actually called the anointed of God. God has anointed him to be king. This is language traditionally used of the Davidic rulers.
Well, anointed in Hebrew is Mashiach.
And that is Mashiach. He is the Messiah. This is really strange language. One worries a little immediately about whether the second Isaiah sees this as the fulfillment of a royal king to come. We've already looked in those early passages, and we thought that might have to do maybe with Hezekiah, but certainly a member of the Davidic line. The Messiah is going to come from the line of David. This seems to be totally counter to all of this. God is going to do lots of things for Cyrus and give Cyrus the Babylonian Empire together with all of its treasures. Not surprisingly, this seems to have generated a good bit of opposition even within second Isaiah's own community. And there's a lot of language here that seems to be responding to the objections. This is such a strange idea.
Do you think that it's so strange that it even called into question God's goodness? I mean, verse 7 speaks of God as one who creates darkness or even creates evil.
I don't think that is meant to be a negative statement. It's probably the most troubling theological statement in the second Isaiah. And what it is saying is, first of all, and we've already seen this, that this is part of God's plan. Cyrus is somehow part of this plan that God has at work in the world. And for that reason, we already know that there is no way in which that plan is going to be thwarted. This is going to happen. So God says, I am God and there is no other. Beside me there is no other God. God is now more or less explaining to Cyrus who it is who's commissioning Cyrus to do this, so that even though you don't know me, they may know, that is everyone, from the rising of the sun in the west and to the west there is no one except me. And then this ultimate statement of a monotheism. I am God, there is no other. I form light and I create darkness. I make good and I create evil. That is the logical extension of a monotheism. And you don't get it anywhere else except right here. This is the first radical statement of that kind of monotheism. And there is obviously a great deal of objection to this line, so much so that not only does God have to convince Cyrus, God apparently has to convince other people as well. In verse 9, woe to you who strive with your Maker, the earthen vessels with the potter. Does the clay say to the one who fashions it, what are you making? Or your work has no handles. Woe to anyone who says to a father, what are you begetting? This all seems to be directed at challenges to this idea, which is so difficult to live with. Can one accept Isaiah's theology here? We know that people have difficulty with the idea that the world is somehow totally determined and that God is responsible for this in some way or another. That was not only a hard position to accept in antiquity, in the Isaiah community, it's a very hard idea to accept now, and whether or not we have any easier time with this than the audience that Isaiah seems to be addressing here is an open question. But
I kind of wonder if there's not also, though, a positive spiritual insight here. If God is one who seems to be almost amoral, certainly inscrutable, creating darkness, raising up Cyrus, who is not the logical candidate for a redeemer. One of the effect on human beings is that one realizes that there's very clear limits to human thought, to human ability. In some ways, it's pushing one back into a stance of vulnerability and humanness, and that, in some ways, is a pathway to salvation. I mean, it's not your normal thinking about how God brings salvation, but it is a possible way of thinking about salvation.
That may well be, and it has to do with the arguments that seem to be going on back and forth in this text about the suitability of agents and God's power and how these things relate to each other, how the human community fits into God's plans.
Speaking of God and the community and how God saves them, I do want to at least raise this language that's used at the very beginning of this division about God as a redeemer, because that terminology comes up more than once.
It does indeed. And
I'm talking about verse 24 of chapter 44.
Thus says the Lord your Redeemer, who formed you in the womb, and so on. And this Redeemer language, this is a favorite title used of God in 2nd Isaiah. The Redeemer language is interesting because the first thing that it points to is the orbit of the family. The concept of redemption is a legal concept, and it was set in place in order to allow things like property and people to remain within the family. It's a way of preserving the family. And so when people redeem property, they pay for it against a debt in order to include it in the family, to keep it in the family. Similarly, if people are sold into slavery, they are redeemed, and there is an obligation of family members to redeem them and bring them back so that the family can again be whole. This, in a way, is an incredible statement. We've gone now from talking about God in covenant relationship to an idea of God as family. And God is going to redeem Israel in exile in order to maintain the integrity of the family. And so the notion of the group of Israelites that is going to enjoy this concept of redemption is very much behind this term, and any time you think about it, you have to think about redemption as God's effort at maintaining the group, of which God is personally a member. And this sets into bold relief the way in which subsequent groups of the people of God, churches, synagogues, and so on, think of themselves as family together, but also family in which God is an active participant.
Yeah.